So, Dylan McDermott, you're one of the stars of Fox's new comedy series, LA to Vegas. I'm curious, what about this show, when you first read the pilot script, pun intended,
Yes.
um, what about it made you want to be a part of it and play Captain Dave?
Well, luckily I had worked with Will Ferrell before on the campaign. I hosted Saturday Night Live, and he was one of the cast members. So I knew he knew my brand of humor. And Chris Henchy, who wrote the campaign, was also a producer on the show, and Owen Burke. And I just knew that those guys got my brand of humor. And I was looking to do something different from what I've been doing, which was, the heavy dramas of, Hostages and Stalker and Dark Blue and American Horror Story. And so I was looking for something a little bit different from that. And I knew that once I read Captain Dave, it was done. I knew exactly who he was.
Well, it is a far cry from the things that you are
Yes,
famous
I would say.
for. So I guess I wonder, did you relish the opportunity to play a character who is so absurdly funny?
Yes. No, I did. I knew. I was like, this is the guy I've been waiting for. Because I had done stand-up in New York years ago. And I loved Peter Sellers. He was like my hero growing up. So I knew that I love this absurd humor. That's my brand of humor. And Captain Dave obviously is absurd. So I was just completely attracted to him. And I just emailed Chris Henchy right away and said, I want to do this.
Well, every actor I've ever talked to in my life has
Yeah.
said that comedy is far harder to do than in a lot of ways because you're looking for an audible reaction.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, having done so many heavy dramas and then doing comedy and doing something like this, do you have any perspective on that now, which is more difficult?
Funny enough, it's a good question. Thank you for that question. But I think, oddly enough, I find comedy easier in a way because there's something about drama that is innately so hard because you have to find the nuances in drama that in comedy come to me more naturally, because I think because I started in that way. When I was 20 years old, I was doing stand up, and had my own little. It was me and my buddy. It was called the Cuckoo Heads, and every Sunday night we would perform. So, and I was a bartender, and I was a waiter, and I was always kind of like being funny. So I think that was my initial instinct into the business. And I did Biloxi Blues on Broadway for a year, really honing that stuff in terms of getting, like you were talking about, getting that reaction. So when you hit your line just right, bombs would go off in the theater because it was just like so much laughter.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about the show and about Captain Dave, the character you played.
Yeah, the show really is, what they call a workplace comedy, which I think is funny in itself. And it all takes place on a plane. And so you have the flight attendants and you have the passengers, and you have my character, Captain Dave, who was sort of like this throwback, if you will. I think I put him specifically in 1991. And he has stayed there ever since. He doesn't watch the news. He wears the same clothes. He hasn't caught up to present day reality. So he truly is a throwback to another time. And, he lives in a camper in a parking lot, and he has no love in his life, and he has a dog. And his whole life, he says that his true love is the sky. And I think that's where he lives.
Well, there's definitely a kind of sadness about this guy. But for all the swagger and all the things that he has, there's moments where he talks about not being fulfilled in his life and, of wanting other things. So, can you talk about that kind of deep well of sadness and making that funny?
Yeah. I think that's really, because I thought so much about this guy, because I was really looking to try to create this figure, and come up with all these, like you're talking about, not just one thing, because so much of the time you see these characters on television, they're sort of one note, And I was really looking for a deeper character to play and sort of veil it, with comedy. And I'm so glad that you picked up on that, because that's something that I really worked on with him. That there is a sadness about him, and there is a disappointment, in himself. And but then I wanted to mix this with this swagger and covering. He's always covering, and but there's a real loneliness to Captain Dave. That he really does want to be loved. He's the guy who doesn't get invited to the party. And there's a reason for that. There's a real reason.
Right.
So I was looking to play that guy because there's something inside me that also feels that way sometimes, and I was using, because you always have to use you at the end of the day as an actor. You always use pieces of yourself, and there's that guy that I was in high school, that I kind of like plucked out of my psyche and put into Captain Dave.
Right. So talk a bit about the cast that surrounds in this show.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have such wonderful actors. It's the hardest thing in the world to create a cast. And chemistry. You just never know. I remember when I did the table read for The Practice years ago, I was like, oh, I knew that these guys were the perfect people for the role. And when I had the table read for LA to Vegas, I felt the same thing. These people are absolutely perfect for each and every one of their roles. So always and that's Steve Levitan really cast the show. He directed the pilot and produces the executive producer on the show, and he found these people. And Nathan Lee Graham, who plays Bernard, is so wonderful. He's a theater actor from New York, and he does such a great job as Bernard. And Kim Matula, the hardest role I think possibly to cast in the show, because everything centers around her. Ed Weeks, who's on the Mindy Project, is perfect for his role. That was a really hard role to cast. We just have such a good time. Every day I laugh on this show. I go to work and I laugh my ass off all day long, and they pay me for it. So it's like the greatest job in the world.
You bring up Kim Matula, and I wanted to talk about her specifically because, her character, there's a lot of kind of similarities, dare I say, between her and Captain Dave, because when we first meet her, she's wanting something more out of her life as well, specifically to work for a different airline.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the relationship there?
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I appreciate your thoughtful questions. I think that they're tied together in some weird way. I think that they help each other and get through this whatever madness that they're in. But you're right, they're both lonely, they're both a little sad, their lives are sort of broken. They're on this flight together, metaphorically and physically. So I think that they're just trying to help one another get through it. I think it all kind of culminates in that episode Parking Lot B, when she comes to stay with him. He out of the kindness of his heart, he says, come stay with me, don't worry about it. And then she becomes a nightmare, and he has to like kick her out because she's just too much. So there's always this, they're not really like brother and sister. They can't live without each other, but they have to get away from each other at the same time.
It's certainly different from what would usually be in shows like this, where you two would become romantically involved.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, I mean, as the season went along, what were some highlights for you? I mean, you brought up that episode, and it's great in the way that it surprises audiences with their expectations.
Yeah.
What were some other highlights for you from this season?
I think the pilot, certainly Muay Thai, is right up there with that. The karate or the Muay Thai into taking this passenger down on the plane with my legs. Hard to beat that. Right. The oxygen, grabbing oxygen. I think Bernard's birthday party, certainly when we got dressed up, was fun. I think Parking Lot B was a great episode. I think Captain Dave's on a roll, which is coming up on Tuesday. is one of my favorite episodes as well, because Captain Dave really just gets on a tear. And I love the announcements, all the announcements on the show. I really enjoy those. I enjoy doing those because you really see Captain Dave compromised in many ways, that he's paid off to do these announcements. So there's a reel that they did for the Deadline contenders of all Captain Dave's greatest moments, and I thought it was perfect. I asked them to send it to me because I just thought, oh man, that's the whole season right there, all Captain Dave's finest moments.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, since you've mentioned it's a workplace comedy, which is, of course, one of the oldest formats in the business. But yeah, of course. But that being set on an airplane, I mean, is kind of unique. I mean, especially since some of your recurring characters are passengers, like Peter Stormare, for instance, or Olivia Macklin. So, I mean, were you surprised at the ability that the writers had to find stories every week to get all these people together each time?
No, because if you think about it, it's really an easy write in terms of having passengers come on every week. I always look at it, I grew up watching Love Boat,
right?
And remember all those characters that they used to come on. I don't know if you watched it or not, but they used to have all these guest stars come on every week, so you could center around them, and then you have the flight attendants and the pilots and all the passengers. So to me, it seems like it's a natural to be able to come up with all these so many crazy stories. When every time I fly, there's a crazy story of somebody doing something stupid. So I think there's an endless amount of stories.
Well, now I'm looking forward to all of the episodes with the TV stars coming in and out of.
Yes, exactly.
You as Gavin MacLeod.
That's basically who I am.
Right. Yeah. Very different kind of Gavin MacLeod in there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, then where do you? Because you guys did get picked up for 3 extra episodes this season. I'm curious, like in the future, where do you see the show going?
I think it's more of the same. And I would love to see the show get a little bit more extreme. I kind of like it when it goes off the rails. There was a scene I think it was some kind of, when we were all stuck on the plane, and Captain Dave was drunk off his ass. And I just thought that was just amazing to see him, just really, really trashed. It didn't really make it to that cut. I did takes where I was really just on my ass, literally. And I just thought that to me is actually funnier because that happens. You know what I mean? And I would like it to be less safe. I would love it to just, let us go, let it go. That to me is my brand of humor. I love that stuff. But, I think that people are always a little bit worried. You know what I mean? Everybody's a little worried. And I would say be less worried and just throw it against the wall.
So you are a Golden Globe winner and an Emmy nominee for The Practice. What did that recognition mean for you?
Well, I think that it's it's obviously it's so flattering and so nice, because every actor works really hard, and some are recognized and some are not recognized. And there are some amazing actors who have never been recognized or given an award. But I guess the best thing about it is that when they say your name, they actually say the award first. Golden Globe winner, Dylan McDermott. So, you kind of get that little before, and it gives you some recognition as an actor. It's always very nice. It's only because for me, it represents a time in my life when I did The Practice and I worked so hard on that show. So it's nice to have an award for something you worked so hard on for so many years, and you have had so many hours of being there. And I busted my ass on that. I mean, I gave my blood on that show. So it's a good reminder of all the work I did, if anything else.
Well, I look forward to more flights with Captain Dave.
Yay, Captain Dave.
Only on television, though, not when I'm
Yeah,
actually.
no, I love playing. I've been telling this story, but there was a time when I was driving home from work,
Mhm.
and this has never happened before, and I was like, oh shit, you know what? I still want to be Captain Dave. So most of the time you're like so happy to be like, you're done with work and you want to go home, but Captain Dave really lives in me, and it's really, really fun to play him. So I look forward to doing more of that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Congratulations on the show.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Same here.